You're listening to Geopolitics and Empire. Support the Renegade transmission. As always, you can do that by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack, or you can try the Apple subscriptions as Supercast as well. You can always donate through the website, purchase a consult if you want to chat with me, and check out all of my affiliates. Joining us for the very first time, finally, on the podcast is Jason Bassler of the Free Thought Project. His links are in the description. Welcome, fellow Independent Media Alliance member.
Thank you so much, Ravoy. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you for being flexible too. I was deathly ill last week, so glad to be feeling better and glad to be joining you today.
Well, it's my turn. I'm a bit under the weather as this week starts, but that's how it goes. And you know, I've been following you and your work for years, even way before the COVID 1984. Free Thought Project and all that. You got big, and then they took you home. You got erased, and so maybe for people who aren't aware of the work that you do, whatever you want to tell us about yourself, the work you do with Free Thought, that sort of experience, and then your worldview when it comes to politics.
Sure, man. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. Again, thanks for having me on. And my story started way back in 2011. And actually prior to that, growing up, I grew up in the Bay Area, California. Counterculture politics was kind of just in your wheelhouse. People in that area very much in tune with what's going on. And well, I thought so anyway, until I kind of got outside of that bubble. But I grew up in that area. And so I was very much interested in activism at a young age. But somewhere around 2011, as I just mentioned, Occupy Wall Street actually was going on. And that was kind of my adult, coming of age moment when I started to pay attention to what was going on there. It was one of the first times when we really had access to all this information, right? We had YouTube showing us what was going on the ground with the protests. We had the information coming out through the various independent press that was on the ground. And it just basically lit a fire in me, man. It sparked up something inside of me, and it's been going ever since. I think a lot of that was seeing police really being rough, very heavy-handed with the protesters. And up until that point, I was under the same delusion as everybody else. Like, police are here to protect us and serve the community, right? So when I saw the really aggressive nature of law enforcement handling those protests, and of course it got much worse after that, I knew I had to get involved somehow. So in 2012, created Police the Police, which is primarily an online organization that documents and archives police brutality, abuse of authority, and police violence generally. And about a year after that, I met up with my partner, Matt Agarist, and he was kind of covering the same information. We were both working for a different outlet at the time. We realized if we put our minds together, we could kind of focus on this niche, which was libertarian flavored police accountability, government accountability kind of stuff. So in 2023, we launched the Free Thought Project, and man, right off the bat, it was just a success. It seemed like we were filling this void, this hunger for this information that was out there. And of course, prior to that, there was cop watch movements. There was people recording police. It was mostly leftist kind of endeavor. So when we hit the scene, we were kind of really feeding that desire for the libertarian side of things. Like, how can we end the drug war? How do we push back on the militarization of police and all these different types of things? So I immediately saw success with the organization. We were reaching millions of people every week, and billions of views. Even in 2017, I think we almost had, it was a little less than 1 billion views across the different social media networks and across the different pages. At that time, we really believed that social media could change the world. It was, it was kind of optimistically naive, but we really had that understanding and that belief that if people just had the right information that they needed to understand kind of the bigger world around them and what was happening, that we would see some type of immediate change. Well, unfortunately, it turns out that wasn't it. And it seems like, if anything, social media has been used now to kind of polarize the left and the right. But that was the social media golden age. That was prior to all the algorithm manipulation. It was even prior to all the fact checking and all that stuff. Thank God that seems to have subsided by now. But as you mentioned, yeah, we were doing very well for a few years there. We had built a team up. think we had like 7 or 8 writers on the team. We had a social media team. We had a video editing team. We were on pace to be kind of the new like alternative Vice, actually, if you're familiar with Vice. And I know they've kind of gone down the drain since then. But at one point, that was kind of what we were compared to. And around 2018, I think it was actually at the end of 2018, both Facebook and Twitter colluded to remove our pages and organizations on the same day within hours of each other, resulting in a loss of nearly 6 million followers altogether. And so, as you can imagine, it was pretty devastating for us. We had to pretty much let go of our entire team within the next few weeks and had to start rebuilding immediately. But we're still here. We're still trying to do what we can. We're still posting every day. We're still writing stories. We're doing our podcasts. We just released a children's book a couple of years ago, teaching kids their rights. So I think the longer I get into this, the more I realize that like the one thing that we can change for sure is ourselves, and if we want to change the world, then you really have to just be that shining example. You have to kind of live that life. So I feel like maybe our objective has changed slightly, but we're still here, still trying to do the same thing. And we're actually on pace right now to potentially get some funding in the future. So hopefully we're kind of back where we once were. Although I think the algorithms and the social media game has changed pretty drastically. So I don't know if we'll ever get back to the 1 million follower status, but nevertheless, we're still here and still ready to fight. So.
Yeah, it's a long road, as you say, and we learn a lot, and we just keep on keeping on. And I did my podcast for the first decade for free. Like there was no money. I was a day job as a teacher, professor, and I just had fun moonlighting as a podcaster. And I don't even know what my motivations were. I just wanted to talk to smart people. There was no money. I didn't want clicks or fame. But then you just end up where you end up. And then, around 2020, I started digging into the topic of the what some people call the Palantir Panopticon. More specifically, I had on Edwin Black, the historian who looked at IBM and the Holocaust and eugenics. And, he calls it the algorithm ghetto. There's many words for it, right? Social credit system, the cyber gulag, digital gulag, electronic concentration camp. So that's going global. And so maybe then, to get your thoughts on where we're at, where I love the stuff you post on your Telegram and X. I'm constantly sharing that effectively we have a uniparty. And I pretty much think every country has a uniparty. And we've got these like transnational financier, technocrat class globalists who've got their hands in everything. And then they're just basically militarizing, not just the U.S. Like we're seeing it here in Mexico and Europe, and not to mention, of course, the Russias and Chinas. But what's sort of your thought on some of the plans that they have?
Well, I think one thing has become entirely clear over the past year is that Americans are easily distracted. They're apathetic, tribalistic, and they really appreciate the allure of illusion. We talk about freedom in this country, but behind the scenes, we're quietly centralizing power, and policing dissent. There's certainly a daddy complex. And I think that comes from years of propaganda. And this is globally, obviously. It's not just, exclusive to the United States, but I'm witnessing now a profound amount of cognitive dissonance, Stockholm syndrome. I mean, I know there's all these psychological terms that maybe might play into this, but too many really just seem to mistake the country for the direction of the government. And I think that's a big mistake, In fact, I just heard Dave Smith say this quote, like, I love America so much that I feel compelled to hate the government, And it's like, I think if you do understand the true nature of government and what it consists of, and everything you were just mentioning, a lot of this technocracy that's going on behind the scenes, the social engineering to really shift our whole dynamic as a country. I think that it does raise this bigger question of like, what is really going on? These aren't exactly elected representatives anymore. And I think we've become a population that's become trained to kind of defend the very systems that unfortunately exploit us. And a lot of times with pride, we've been seeing this more so probably than ever. I've been doing this work for like 14 years now, probably a little bit longer than that. And I've never been really as concerned as I am right now. The blind allegiance, the loyalty to Trump, it really has to be 1,000-fold more than even what I experienced and saw with the Obama years. And I thought it was bad then. They're certainly a political cult, and they're acting like it. And we've gotten to this point where we're like, I'm sure you witnessed it too with the Renee Good shooting, seeing it online, and the Alex Pretty shooting as well. It seems like there's this profound dismissal of facts, right? It's this kind of mentality that it's okay when we do it. But of course, if the left's doing the same thing, it would be, scorched earth, all hell would be breaking loose. So it feels like in a lot of ways, referring back to those videos, that we're kind of living in different realities. We're not in the same reality anymore. And it's not really politics. It's evolved from past that. And I think the tribalism, the political identity, all that stuff really is kind of playing a part into kind of creating this cult-like atmosphere. Obviously, we're in the midst of this culture war, this content war, this information war. I get that, but I'm also seeing a lot of parallels to, history. I mean, I think any student of history could probably be seeing this as well, right? Like when populations trade their critical thinking for comfort, for this, quote, loyalty to truth, when what they believe is truth, it's going to end in a bad place. And there's this kind of devotion to Daddy Trump, to the leader, that's unfolding in front of people's eyes. And it's happened before, it's happened plenty of times before. And I think this time might be particularly ominous just because of the control mechanisms, the surveillance state that's really being built up around us. But all the hallmarks are there. And I mean, we could even throw in the militarized police with this, and you put on the cherry on top, the biometric surveillance state, and it gets scary really fast. So yeah, I'm a little concerned right now, more so probably than ever before.
I fully agree with you. And just to get your further thought there, and it's, there are still some, do I want to use the word magatards?
It works.
who listen and disagree with me, but it seems like their ranks are thinning, because look, I mean, you're coming, I guess we call you libertarianish. I'm conservative Christian, and it's like, let's look at the facts here, people. To strip away your categories and your labels. Yeah. ICE. I mean, when the DHS was created, it's like, that's Nazi Gestapo. That shouldn't even exist. Homeland Security. And then, you got deplatformed in 2021. Patreon terminates me after the Atlantic Council and also Associated Press do a hit piece. And then 2022, as the DHS is rolling out the Disinformation Governance Board with Nina Yankowicz, that same week, I'm banned for life from PayPal. So the DHS is doing this sort of stuff. And then, as you just mentioned, the latest news, my wife is not a U.S. citizen. I've said this before in the podcast, but if I want to go back home to America and I have to naturalize her, I must now give my DNA to the DHS. Right. As US, the same DHS, which is trying to destroy me. Like what? And then ICE, like we're all seeing the stuff that ICE is doing. No warrants to enter your home, just killing and harassing U.S. citizens. And now they're building out these warehouses. Like, who do you think these warehouses are going to? And they're going around calling U.S. citizens. I'm sure you've documented this, domestic terrorists. And so, it's really, I think the signs are there. And at this point, it's not about left or right. I have guests on that are leftists. I'm not, but they have excellent analysis detailing the objective facts. And so just thoughts here. And I mean, we're basically spiraling into a police state.
Correct. Yeah, I think the writing is on the wall. And, it's funny how, as a libertarian, we find ourselves in the center, right? We're not, and I know you mentioned you weren't a libertarian, but we don't have really allies on the left and the right, but certain elements of society, certain aspects come up like COVID, right? There's a huge pandemic. All of a sudden, we're partnering with the right wing, and it seems to make sense. They seem to be good. They seem to be aligned with us on the freedom elements, right? Not locking down, the legitimacy of some of the mandates and lockdowns and stuff like that. But as I was warning during those years, like if you end up compromising on some of these things to ally with the right, eventually it's going to turn on you. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. We're seeing this heavy-handed authoritarianism with very little recourse, very little conversation coming from the right about it. And now, all of a sudden, our friends on the left happen to be spot on. They happen to be exactly aligned with libertarians. For the most part, it seems like there's still libertarians who strayed too far to the right, and they've maybe lost some of the view on their principles. But I don't know. To me, it seems like, yeah, this shouldn't really be a hard conversation, especially when we're talking about the same right that could vilify all CDC employees, but now all ICE agents are angels and they're benevolent and they're here to save society and get rid of the evil illegal immigrants, so very little consistency within these parties. And I guess we've known that for a long time. You stand for nothing, you fall for anything. And I think the social engineers are playing us like a fiddle. I mean, now the left wing screaming, don't tread on me. And, 4 years ago, the right was screaming, my body, my choice. I mean, it's completely inverted, but I think somebody's having a good laugh about all this.
I saw your tweet about that, and I saw a story yesterday from California. The mask mandates. The right was against rightly so, against the mask mandates during COVID, and now it's like ICE has masks, right? Mask mandates, and they are fighting to allow ICE to keep their masks on. So now they're like pro mask mandates, which is insane.
And beyond that, even cities in California, I know LA County, and I think it was Fresno, are saying that they're not going to be upholding the new California no secret police law that Gavin Newsom signed into effect, which is basically, outlawing federal employees in the state of California from wearing these masks. I know that's a federal directive, so I don't think that obviously the state is going to really implement something like that, but they could if they really wanted to. But it feels like there are certain elements within law enforcement that just, hey, we don't have to adhere to this law just because we choose not to. And I know there's some debate to that, but it just goes to show that it is one big club, that they're here to protect each other. And I think not only that the right wing has just really advocated for this, even though it's nowhere close to the mass deportations that were promised, even though that we've already seen 11 people killed by ICE just this year, on pace to 1,000 plus people this year. And I mean, if you go even a step further than that, it seems like there is more to this. There seems like there is some strong vitriol that's surfacing between the protesters, the left, and this ICE apparatus that has basically turned into a federalized standing army in our cities, And as you mentioned, they're calling people domestic terrorists. Ken Klippenstein actually just documented that there are these secret lists, and there's several of them for different aspects of what they're trying to keep an eye on, but they're all pointing back to American citizens being domestic terrorists. We saw this with the no-flight list, but this is kind of a no-fly list on steroids, right? Because this is going to have larger effects, especially when you start thinking about a company like Palantir, all their various tentacles and different government agencies, and the New York Times actually reporting, I think it was in September, maybe it was earlier, maybe like mid 2025, that Palantir is creating this secret database. So it does feel like right now what we're witnessing is this authoritarianism for the victimization for me, because as we know, eventually there's going to be a Democratic administration that comes into power, and a lot of this mechanism, a lot of this panopticon that they're currently setting up will be used against them somehow. We speculate maybe it'll be taking the guns. Who knows exactly how that will be enforced, but it pendulum always swings back. So I think we'd be hard pressed to not believe that the right is basically just digging their own grave right now, and really the grave of the country and a type of semblance of freedom that's left.
Yeah, and I saw Eric Prince on Bannon the other day, a clip where he's talking about we should use, again, this apparatus, DHS, to debank illegals. And I'm like, I mean, it just blows through the charade. Like, I've already been debanked as a citizen by the DHS. So it's like, it's a total ruse, because you're debanking like Americans who have done, I'm like a school teacher. You're debanking a school teacher for just talking online.
Sure.
What is this? And so, and then if people go back to the very first Geopolitics, like my first Geopolitics and Empire podcast in 2015 was Lord Christopher Monckton, but I had a previous channel which was sort of the genesis of the podcast, Dissident Thinker, and that's linked on the YouTube. And if you go to the first interview there in 2012, it was with Corporal Jesse Thorson. I don't know if you know him. He'd been pulled up on the Ron Paul stage during Ron Paul's campaigns, I think, out in 2012. And I mentioned this on my previous podcast. The secret police came to his home and took him out, renditioned him to a mental asylum because he was a military veteran, people Americans listen to, who was privately to friends and family. He wasn't posting publicly. He was questioning 9/11. And they renditioned him, secret police in America. And John Whitehead of Rutherford, who I had on in 2022, this is 4 years ago. I want to get him back on soon. He was the guy who got Jesse out of the, mental asylum. But this is what's going on in America. And I want to get your further thought. To me, it seems like they want to manufacture, someone somewhere in the deep state wants to manufacture a Civil War 2.0. We see the movies. I think, they were behind the Charlie Kirk events. They're trying to radicalize both sides because I feel like the left and the right, most Americans just want Netflix and chill, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the power brokers are like, we got to get these ants fighting each other, and they're trying to start the show to get the show on the road. So to get your thought on this idea of a second civil war and Balkanization process, and one of my theses is, and to get your thought as well on the technate, right? We're seeing all this stuff with Venezuela, Greenland. It's clear it's been the project for a century. No wonder Elon Musk, is behind the scenes because his grandfather was part of this project. And I see what they did in Europe. World War II, dissolution, European Union, and now it's kind of like, maybe they're behind schedule, so they're like, let's create a civil war so then we can advance with the North American technate. Any thoughts here?
I mean, yeah, Agenda 2030 is right around the corner, right? We're inching towards it, so it doesn't surprise me if there is some type of panic going on with the ruling class elite. Quick side note: John Whitehead is an amazing dude, amazing writer. We had him on our podcast as well a couple months back. The Rutherford Institute guys, definitely check that out. But it does feel like we're quickly becoming a country that believes in nothing. And I know we've always had our factions between the left and the right, but again, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And I do feel like that has been largely implemented and orchestrated upon us. It's easier to control a population, right? When people are constantly fighting, when there is no real backbone or semblance of principle. And again, if they could have us, exchanging our slogans and our mottos every couple years, then that really doesn't give us any type of foundation of liberty, any type of foundation of integrity, especially intellectually and logically, which I think is half the battle here, right? Like, we have to actually see the blueprint as to where we're going. And I think most people have lost sight of that, unfortunately. And it does feel like MAGA has become blinded by their own self-induced rage, and this is part of a demoralization project, obviously, but when they're turning on a VA nurse, calling him a commie, ideologically speaking, of course, because these people are socialists, I think that they've really lost the plot here. And I think that we have become so tribalistic in our political identity that anyone who doesn't align with us to the T, that they might be casted aside. And even though this man worked for the VA, I think most people would see that as being patriotic. The ultra MAGA crowd has now, and they seem to be the loudest, the most vocalist, have been able to turn this into a very much a us versus them. And again, like I say that, but at the same time, it does feel like there is some semblance of racism going on as well. And I know the left really likes to focus on that, but when we're just specifically focusing on brown people, I think there's an issue there. And it doesn't seem to be really widespread in other elements of society and other demographics, right? It seems like they're going straight for the illegal Hispanic, Mexican, people coming from South America, Central America. And, to be honest with you here, I do see a lot of parallels regarding the culture wars with COVID. because both sides were really espousing this like comply or die kind of mentality. You know, I don't know if you remember Biden's tweet of, the winter of illness and death or something like that. I mean, I think both sides have really bought into this. And the right and libertarians saw through the COVID measures as being kind of like extreme, distasteful, infringing, unlawful. That's how the left right now and the progressives see kind of the immigration enforcement as well. It's this extreme, it's militarized, it's dehumanizing, it's an abuse of authority, and so both kind of thought that they're using government in a way that's supposed to be bettering society. But people have this blind spot, I think, especially when you start weighing out, well, okay, is ICE being held accountable for any of this stuff? Has there really been any type of transparency within all this stuff? Not really. Not really. So basically what you have is like, well, what do we want? And this is, of course, the right's argument that the illegal immigrants are breaking the laws. They're raping people. They're criminals. Even though statistically that's not true at all. Americans are much higher in those classes and categories. So there's that element of it. But then, well, we have ICE on our streets doing pretty much whatever they want as well. They're militarized. They're shooting people in the face with less than lethal. They're killing people. They're shooting people. They're standing in front of vehicles so they could actually justify murdering citizens. And of course, the spin machine hits social media and it's all justified. So it does feel like there is this huge detachment from any type of semblance that we once had of any shared principles, any type of shared community within this country. And it's scary, man. It is something that is worrisome because I don't know if I necessarily can envision Americans being involved in any type of prolonged unrest. As you mentioned, the Netflix, the Chick-fil-A, all the easy comforts, creature comforts. I think we might be a little too apathetic, a little too comfortable for what it takes for any type of prolonged violence. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen at the same time, because as we're talking about, this is an information war. It's a culture war. And if one side ends up kind of predominantly coming across victorious, as in having the moral high ground, then I think it could very easily spiral out of control, and we could see more of the same, and more people turning a blind eye to everything that's going on.
Yeah, and as you've outlined, my thesis has always been, they used the COVID 9/11, COVID 1984 as the pretext, the ruse to bring in algocracy, digitalization, technocracy. That obviously, the left were pro that because they're statist, and the right was against it because they're supposed to be pro, small state. Yeah. And then they just flip it. And now they're bringing in, the pretext now is something that pulls on the strings of the right? Nationalism, patriotism, migrants. And for me, I feel like that's just in the same way COVID was for the left, for the right now. It's just a ruse or pretext to further this same digitalization, right? Digital ID because migrants, right? Biometric checks because migrants. And then at some point, once they install enough of the digital architecture, they'll do away with the migrant pretext. And then, it's like, we were alluding to, domestic terrorists now, or Indeed. Whatever other boogeyman. And then they'll switch to something back again on the left. If Newsom comes in or whatever. And to get maybe your further thoughts on the Panopticon, I believe I've seen you speak virtually. Actually, when I was at the People's Reset a few years back, you gave a talk virtually, and then I think you've got a course or an ebook on CBDCs, and just how bad do you think this can get? Because we're talking digital ID here in Mexico now. They've given us 5 months to register our cell phones, or they're going to shut them off. We now have to give our biometrics for the Mexican national ID, or you won't be able to do anything. That's happening in the U.S. with state by state. They're bringing in social age verification, real ID. I'm flabbergasted to see, like, you're seeing it state by state, because that's how they have to do it in the U.S. Michigan and Wisconsin and Alaska. They're now talking about banning VPNs in America. And so basically, if you commit a thought crime, they press a button and you're unpersoned. You become a non-entity, as Edwin Black would say. You're zombied, and you can't buy food literally you're completely locked out of the system. You can't use your passport, you can't use your driver's license, you can't nothing. And so just any further thought on how you see this trajectory of where we're going and how bad it could potentially get.
Sure. Well, thank you for mentioning, my 2023 book. It was 3 ways to prepare for CBDCs. And even though we've kind of sidestepped for now the CBDC, we're still looking at things like stable coins coming down the pipe, and those are coming in hot and heavy. That's just the tip of the iceberg, of course. And you mentioned Mexico. I've been paying attention to a lot of what's going on there. But it's not just Mexico. I think there's a test pilot going on for CBDCs in 134 different countries. And even though in this country, that conversation seems to have quelled, it's always testing the testing grounds for these bigger agendas, these bigger projects. Of course, it's always under the guise of safety and convenience. And the digital ID is basically the backbone of all this. And I think that's why we push so hard against the digital ID, things like the real ID. Even though MAGA totally took an L on that one, they coming from the same place that you were mentioning from the COVID years, being against the COVID tracing, the tracking apps, all that stuff, to complying, and not only complying, but justifying, defending the real ID. All these things really do point in a direction that gives the state and the technocrats full control. We already seen hints of this with big tech colluding with the Biden administration for censorship. But again, it's going to be 1,000 times worse than this. And I only could imagine how they're going to be scraping our social media, previous posts that we've made, anything that we've ever said, basically pointing this stuff out, or even dissenting against the state and the government apparatus. The backbone of this is the digital ID. It will all be connected to different various elements of our lives, our banking, any type of recreation that we want to do. All these things will be somehow interlocked. I think that's just the writing on the wall and just a matter of time at this point. And then you start throwing in things like the automated license plate reader network that's being created right now with Flock, and Flock is, of course, just one company that's engaged in this, and they've happened to caught the ire of social media, but there's several companies that are doing the same exact thing. And all this points back to not only the control element of it, but the data element of this being the new gold rush, right? Because with data, they could not only sell the data, but they could better predict as to what consumer demands are going to be. We just recently saw Matt Damon talking about how Netflix has now instructed writers that they have to repeat the plot of the show 5 different times in the beginning of the very first pilot episode because people aren't paying attention. And that's a totally data-driven type of idea, and something that's come from really analyzing what people are doing and how they're watching. And I feel like that's just one minor example of a bigger picture of what's going on here. But the control panopticon, I think, I'm sure most of your listeners probably are familiar with the bigger picture, but it almost feels so overwhelming with the use of AI, the data aggregation, the data collection. Companies like Palantir are really streamlining this whole process. And again, they're all in bed with the Trump administration, right? We saw that within the first week of Trump's new term here. I mean, we saw Larry Ellison up there. We saw Sam Altman. It's clear that the keys of the kingdom have been handed over. And I think this kind of points to a bigger picture. And I don't know if you wanted to get into this or not, but we're talking about these Epstein files being released right now, right? Like, why now? Why all of a sudden are they dropping the final 3 million documents that largely has been kind of a mess, right? I mean, we've seen even the New York Times pointing out that there's nudity, that a lot of the victims and survivors' names and faces aren't blurred out. It seems like it was kind of hastily done. I don't know exactly why, but if I kind of had to take a step back and speculate as to what the reasoning is now, after 42 days past the Epstein transparency deadline, I would probably say it would be something along the lines of it being a controlled demolition, and part of exactly what we knew that is part of the plan anyway. And this is the same thing that they've been trying to do with the financial system, right? Because ultimately, there's already this distrust with government. I think the majority of people already know that there is something wrong. There's something that's going on that can't quite be fixed. And so I think in this sense, if they were to, again, the problem reaction solution, AKA the Hegelian dialectic, they could further delegitimize the state, the current form of the state, discredit the political class, and potentially usher in this whole new technocratic class. We've seen something even like in Albania, AI prime ministers that are popping up now. This is becoming something that seems to be a perceived solution to, the corruption within the state. And of course, people are fallible. So who better to, have usher in some type of form of the state than computers, than AI, right? They're not going to be taking lobbyists' money. They're not going to be easily persuaded. But there's problems with that. And so I think this all could be a deliberate, thought out strategy that really is part of the Great Reset or Agenda 2030. And that's obviously me putting on my conspiracy theorist hat, but we have to think about these things. We kind of have to think about the long run here.
I think you nailed it. I have the same view, and it's like MAGA is the Great Reset. Trump, the PayPal mafia. I was watching this morning. There's a great Substacker who just popped on the scene, Dre's Dossier. And she did a great half hour on Ellison, Oracle, and the UK digital ID and Tony Blair, and basically how he's trying to make the backbone for the algorithm ghetto to be Oracle and the cloud, who are trying. And his problem is, he said that all our info is fragmented. Your health info, your banking, this and that.
Right.
And they're trying to bring it all together under one roof. And I didn't want to say I demand better psyops, because what you outlined is, it's pretty clear. It's almost like, I think these people think decades in advance, and like they had set up the Epstein honey trap for this moment when the tech would catch up. And back in March of 2020, I was a guest on Spiro Skouras's now defunct podcast. He got deplatformed twice and he just gave up. But I said COVID was about global algocracy. You read Nick Bostrom and they talk about rule. They want a totalitarian world state ruled by AI and algorithm. And now this year and last, you've got Mark Andreessen and Joe Rogan talking about, it'd be cool to have the government run by AI with AI ministers and run by software algorithm. And, if you study Patrick Wood's Technocracy, he was just on. He's been talking for decades. That is the goal, to remove human politicians to install software. So you just outlined it. I think this is it. They brought the Epstein to do away with these corrupt, evil politicians to bring in, Oracle and Stargate and all of that. I find it interesting that so far there have been no consequences. Has there related to the Epstein files? Some, like Lord Mandelson, like some people are just merely stepping down, but no one's going to jail. So I'm thinking that no one will go to jail. They're just going to have these people just be embarrassed and step down and bring in technocracy. And so that's kind of like the deal here, where, okay, you guys gotta have to step down, but you're not going to go to jail. Do you think that, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be any accountability?
There's even speculation that Epstein's still alive, right? And I guess that's probably it's worth thinking about. This is just like the no deep state arrests, just like the no Doge arrests after the revelations that they were, quote, uncovered. Just like Trump, when he said he was going to lock up Hillary. No, there's not going to be any type of accountability, and that's kind of the way that the modern state is set up. It's set up to avoid any type of accountability at all. There's this system of checks and balances, right? So you always have somebody to blame. There's always a way to pass the buck. And the structure of it is set up in a way that prevents any one piece from really being changed by voting or an election, right? It's hard to really radically transform any policy for any type of significant change. Maybe some, cutting of the fat here and there, but generally speaking, these things are meant to continue on and on. So I think back to the Epstein and why now, I think that really, I couldn't put my finger on any other reason as to why they would release them now. I mean, this is after Trump called this all a Democrat hoax. Even Elon Musk keeps going on about how it's mostly Democrats in the Epstein files. But I think it makes sense to, at least try to play with the idea of, why they would be doing it now. And it's no secret. I think with the age of information, people no longer have trust in government. If that means that they're going to have some type of uprising, I don't think we're there. I don't think people are upset enough. You think it would be something like the Epstein files that would actually bring about some type of strong anger. I've seen people talking about, tax revolt, not voting anymore, but I think that's the extent of it. And to me, it just feels like they have programmed the American population, and it probably goes beyond America, to be apathetic to most of this stuff. Well, I can't do anything. There's nothing I could do about it. But we do need to see some type of accountability here. We're starting to finally get some semblance of transparency, but without the accountability side of it, then it's pointless.
I was seeing that clip yesterday. There were a few clips of Trump, and the guy's lying. First there was the thing, his world, he's got that Liberty coin or something, and UAE spent $500 million buying his world Liberty coin. He's like, I don't know anything about it. Come on, And then the other one was, oh, I don't know Epstein. Well, and then there's like photos of him decades ago, body partying, hardcore partying with Epstein. You're lying. The man is a liar. You can't cut it any other way. And you mentioned, I see the same thing here in Mexico. Someone used the term, we use NPC term, normies, lemmings, LLM. LLMs, lemmings, spelling lemmings with LLM. And I try to tell people here, my neighbors are techno-fascist. Like, listeners know that I live in a gated community. And I predicted this 6 years ago. I predicted this, that one day they would install an app for everyone living here and a biometric exit and entry. And 3 months ago, they installed a biometric exit and entry. I was the only person that loudly said, hell to the no. And I forced them to give me a physical key. And the project for the app so far has been put on the shelf. But what was my point? That a lot of people are these techno-fascist, I call them liberal globalist lemmings.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's the future that they're trying to push us into. And, to some degree, there is convenience here. They always try to position these things as being, safety oriented or convenience oriented. But the biometrics are a part that really scares me, and for various reasons, right? Because, well, first of all, how much do we trust these third-party companies who are collecting the biometrics, right? Because biometrics are one of these things that if they get leaked to the internet, if somehow it gets exposed to a large audience, that's not something you could take back. It's not something that you ever get to erase. You don't get to change your iris. You don't get to, redo or reprint your fingerprint. It's something that's out there forever, and it could be exploited. It could be hacked. It could be used against you forever. So that element of it, I don't think anybody's really thinking about. And they want to scan their palm at Amazon, or, unlock their phone with a iris scan, or all these things. I get the convenience element. I'm a bit of a tech guy myself, even though I'm concerned about the technocratic element of all this. But at the same time, the safety surrounding these things, and the security apparatus. I mean, we know that all the time companies are getting hacked. A lot of information, thousands and thousands of emails are getting leaked at a time. So why would we also want our biometrics to play any part of that, and be involved with any of that? And I don't know, it seems kind of ironic to me that, again, a lot of the same people who were yelling the loudest about these things during the COVID years have now turned a blind eye to it and seem to have accepted it.
And I was just thinking, like, yeah, months ago, I put in the neighbor chat here. I'm like, you guys are crazy. I'm not submitting to this. I'm a crazy Croat. What
Good.
about privacy data? Our previous administrations ran off with our money. You think they wouldn't sell off our biometrics? And
Exactly.
I'm thinking these guys are probably thinking, oh, this retarded, stupid Croatian. And then literally 2 months later, we had the Mexican government say you have to register your cell phone with the cell providers. And the people who did, they all had their info hacked and go public. I'm
Yeah.
like, you idiots. Like a month later, what I warned about just happened with your phones. And it's just like, who's the retard now? And so
Okay. Yeah.
um, I did want to get your thoughts as we wind down on just a little bit geopolitics, foreign policy, American Empire, World War III. Do you think the empire is in decline and just the wars? I mean, I'm through and through anti-war. Like all I mean, it's I do like the memes when it came to Trump and Maduro, but it's just wild to witness them just taking Maduro like it's a game of Risk and then just bombing countries that have nothing to do with anything. Iraq and Iran now, and Russia and China. What are your thoughts when it comes to the military-industrial complex?
Yeah. I think I read something recently that empires tend to last on average around 250 years, and the U.S. is like the 243-year mark. So, yeah, buckle up, guys. I think what generally we're seeing, and you're probably seeing this as well, that the American public has been thoroughly exhausted from these forever wars that took place in the Middle East over a 20-year period. And now we're seeing the backlash to that. What we're seeing is the war state, the warmongers in power, playing the game a little more strategically, a little more effectively by not necessarily invading or occupying these countries, maybe not even a huge bombing campaign like we've seen in the past. Now it's just these one-offs, right? Like there will be a certain bombing campaign. We saw this with Iran. We saw this with Venezuela. And yeah, it is incredibly concerning about how easy it was for the American public to sign off on this. Well, it was a limited strike. It wasn't, any type of occupation, boots on the ground. People still died. The country has been upended. And I guess there's probably mixed debate as to if it was a good thing or if it was a bad thing. Ultimately, in my opinion, this is just more of the imperial war machine doing exactly what it does. It's being an empire. And I think, if you want to look at, if it was the oil, that could be part of it. It could be the minerals. That could be part of it as well. I think this has been a long play by Trump, though. For years now, he's been talking about doing this, and he finally did it. And the craziest part, too, is that was all under the guise of drugs, right? Bombing these speedboats. And I think we've only seen that happen once since Maduro was taken captive. But at the same time, the American public has to be smarter than this. Like, we need to understand and recognize that there is no thing as a virtuous mission or endeavor by the U.S. government. It wasn't to liberate the Venezuelan people. It wasn't to help that situation at all. That's always the talking points. That's always the window dressing, the veneer, the facade. So yeah, man, it's I expect to probably see more of this. As generally Wesley Clark said, when we're kind of crossing off the names of the country at this point, the different countries that he alluded to way back when. But yeah, man, it's interesting to see where this goes. I kind of wish that the anti-war right would kind of come back. They seemed pretty fervent there for a brief period of time when it was Biden sending billions over to Ukraine, over to Israel. They didn't want to see that. Well, maybe not so much the Israel part, but the Ukraine part. And now it's, well, if Trump positions it in a way that makes sense to them, it seems like it's somehow benefiting the U.S. and maybe sprinkle on some type of liberation rhetoric or something like that. That's all they need. And they're going to be behind it. Now, I want to be clear here. There are some of the quote red pill MAGA that have seen through it. I don't like really talking with broad strokes. So I say MAGA because it's generally the mentality coming from MAGA, but there are some people within the right who are becoming more disillusioned, who did push back against the Iran bombing, saw through the Venezuela drug war nonsense. So I guess the good news is that maybe it wasn't really about the drugs, and we're not going to play world police about, the entire global drug trade, which it seemed like could be a part there, because the way they were talking, it was almost like they were going to infuse the war on terror with the war on drugs, but just globally. So thankfully, maybe that's the silver lining here, is that if it was just this operation to seize Maduro and, somehow take control over the oil in Venezuela, even though that's completely against what I stand for, completely against everything that I would like to see. Maybe the silver lining is that it's not about drugs, and the U.S. isn't going to start bombing more countries and more boats and seizing more oil tankers and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think they're moving us to the technates, and there's agreement on the other side of the pond, the Orwellian superblocks. I think that's where we're going. And to your point, I just thought of something when you were talking about broad strokes. You're right. And I just thought of, like, we have GMO. What we have now is genetically modified MAGA, and then you have the organic MAGA. And I'm thinking of Thomas Massey. Like, Trump is going after destroying Massey. I'm like, that guy is real deal organic MAGA. He's more MAGA than Trump. And so I think that's what's going on. And then any thoughts on how to push back? And I focus more when it comes to solutions, because I feel like they are advancing how to survive this dystopia. But I think we just got to keep doing what we're doing. Everyone, wherever they are, what is their specialty? My specialty career has been this, basically. Yeah. What I'm doing now as a podcaster in the classroom. So I just kind of inadvertently transitioned from teacher, professor to podcaster. Just any thoughts on what can we do, and then tips on surviving the gulag?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Thanks again for having me on. This has been fun. We have a tendency, at least in the States, to react, not be proactive. And we see that online, right? Anytime there's a big story, I mean, there's all the talking heads come out. There's thousands of tweets with millions of views. But one of the things I really think that we need to do is be more proactive, not reactive. And this is where my anarchist, agorist ideology kind of kicks in, right? And one of the things that I mentioned in the book that I referenced earlier, that I wrote in 2023, 3 ways to prepare for CBDCs, is investing in yourself, learning new skills, learning how to grow food, basic repairs, self-sufficiency, even crypto. I know crypto is kind of a mixed bag right now. We're seeing Bitcoin drop, and we've learned a lot about Bitcoin over the past 10 years. I wouldn't necessarily invest in Bitcoin, but there are privacy coins out there like Xano that are privacy focused. I would say try to learn about that stuff. We're going to have to move away from the financial system that they've built, especially when the stable coins come in. Stable coins are basically another way to kick the dollar down the road. I mean, it's eventually going to crash, but for right now, they could continue kicking the debt down the road with the stable coins, which are much more effective than CBDCs, by the way, because they can appeal to the globe, not just one certain demographic or one certain geographical area. So I really do think privacy coins are going to be the way of the future. Learn how they work, invest in them. I always tell people to know their rights. In fact, I do a monthly, or I was doing a monthly Know Your Rights course. Now you can find that at solutionaryuniversity.com and learn at your own pace. But I think learning your rights, knowing your rights, teaching your kids your rights, all very important. I know it feels like we're in a time where our rights don't really even matter anymore, but ultimately, when it comes down to having your day in court, it will matter. So beyond that, just reading, sharpening your intellect, working out, staying fit. Like I said before, just being that person. You have to be, you got to be the change that you want to see in the world, right? So if you really want to see these things, you have to be the model. You have to be what people could point at and look at as to, this person's living life the correct way. And not only that, he's prepared for what's coming in the future. It's probably one of the greatest downfalls as a society as we have, is that we've become less and less self-sufficient over the years. And so barter trade, stuff like that. If there is any type of inevitable crash, which is coming, by the way, it's just a matter of time. We need to be able to know how to survive and keep our family safe, keep our loved ones and friends safe. So training, learning how to use guns safely, bulking up. I mean, all these things are important. And then more on the intellectual side, probably just, and people always say, there's already too many podcasts out there, there's too many libertarian podcasts, but I think we should be talking about this, just like what we're doing right now. And you said that's kind of what you're focused on. Same, very much the same. I feel like this is where we start at the ground level, sharing the information. Without this information, people can't necessarily understand the world around them and how to live better, live more in alignment with their values, their principles. And, all the motivation that we should ever need should come from doing this for our children and for future generations. I'm a parent of two. I'm trying to raise my kids away from the authoritarian parenting paradigm. I feel like that's something that's creates statism in our lives. It's pre-programming children to believe in the state and authority. So this is probably a very long-winded answer, but it's all of these things, and I don't think it's just one. But to your point, it's not. I'm not expecting everybody to take up all these things. These are all things that we could do. But fit in, get in where you fit in, whatever you do. If you're a musician, if you're a poet, if you're a writer, if you're an investigator, we need you. We need an all hands on deck. This is an all hands on deck moment right now. So yeah, we can't really change others, but we can inspire them. And just keep hacking the matrix with love and truth, man.
Maybe just the last thought from you on, you've gone through the trials and tribulations of producing content, podcasts, free thought, policing the police. Just any tip in the environment that we find ourselves in going forward? My view is I don't look at my analytics. I'm just firing away.
Yes.
And like a soldier on the battlefront. And I think too many people I see so many people whine, people that I like. I'm so shadow banned. No one's looking at me. Like, we all are. Nobody cares. Stop whining. Just fire away. And then there are people who are starting new Substacks and podcasts, and they're complaining. Look, it took me 10 years to get to where I am, doing it for free. You're going to have a day job and then do this as a side project, or find ways, business opportunities to monetize. It's a really long game, especially now. But just any quick thought on the space.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, my friend. It's harder now to do this work than ever before. They flag us, they put us in a box, they limit our reach. That's just part of the game. There are ways of breaking free from that. You mentioned not checking your analytics. I love that idea. I'd also say not checking your notifications either, because that's a good way to spiral, waste time, and really damage your mental health. I would say stay in tuned with your authentic self, share the information that you believe and know is true, and let it go from there. Find a niche, learn it, master it, know everything about it, become an expert. Some people say be objective. I say the complete opposite. I say be biased. Just make sure people know you're biased. It's not possible to be completely objective anyway. My bias is truth, accountability, it's liberty, peace, those things. So if I stray away from that, then I know I'm starting to get into trouble. But authenticity repeated builds trust. And I think that's important. So find the nuance. Not everything is black and white. People really appreciate finding that middle ground and trying to explore certain ideas. And virality is important, but it's not important as being authentic and just continuing to plug and put out information that is true.
And what you said, if you were in Washington, London or Brussels, the Fourth Reich, EU, New European Soviet, they would say you're biased. We want to drop bombs. You're not objective, Jason. All of your links are in the description. There's the link tree. I'll put that all in the description. But where are the best places for people to go on? And if you've got any projects, services available for purchase?
Yeah, thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Again, this has been a blast. So thanks for having me on. TheFreeThoughtProject.com is kind of the main hub. You can find our podcast there, although it's on Spotify, Apple We have a bunch of great guests. And in fact, I'd love to have you on as well. It would be amazing to have you on the podcast and maybe explore further down this rabbit hole. Otherwise, jasonbassler.com, that's where you could get the book I was talking about. There's also a link there for my Know Your Rights course, so you could check that out. Social media wise, my two biggest accounts are Instagram, jason.e.bassler, and then Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I'm not 13 years old. So Jason Bassler 1. And pretty much every other social media platform you could think of, you could probably find me on there if you put my name into the search bar.
All right. To quote the ghost of Churchill, I'll see you on the digital landing grounds. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.